Cheated by my CEO father-in-law's coup, my revenge walkout birthed a startup and ended his empire. I was given 5 minutes to clear my desk before my husband's father, the CEO, dismissed me in front of the entire leadership team. Instead of breaking, I smiled and said, "Thank you." One by one, 22 colleagues quietly stood and followed me out. Nia sneered until the legal director turned pale and whispered, "Get the lawyer now." 4 minutes, and 30 seconds left, Nicholas announced to the room, his Rolex glinting as he tapped its face. I continued packing my desk drawer, pulling out button 6 years worth of work, project files, team photos, the backup drive containing every system architecture I'd built for Vertex Solutions. The N12 executives watched in silence as I placed each item deliberately into my cardboard box. Nia Blackwood leaned back in her chair, examining her manicured nails with practiced boredom. She thought she'd won. 4 minutes, Nicholas called out again, his voice sharp with authority. That's when Logan Mitchell stood up from his desk outside the conference room's glass walls, laptop bag already in hand. But I should explain how we got here, how 3 weeks of calculated betrayal led to this moment where my father-in-law counted down my professional execution like a microwave timer. Before we continue, I want to thank you for being here. If you believe that dedication and hard work should be valued over office politics, please consider subscribing. It helps more people discover these important stories. Now, let's see what Nicholas had planned. It started at Sunday dinner at the Harrington estate, where we gathered like actors in a play nobody wanted to perform anymore. I'd arrived with Taylor and my homemade apple pie, the one with the lattice crust that took 2 hours to perfect. Eleanor always requested it but never mentioned who made it, as if pies materialized from thin air or perhaps the help. Another record quarter for Vertex Solutions, Nicholas had proclaimed, standing at the head of the mahogany dining table that could seat 420 but usually held just the N4 of us, drowning in its own excess. He raised his crystal tumbler, the whiskey inside catching the light from Eleanor's precious Viennese chandelier. "We're dominating the market because I know how to recognize talent and put it where it belongs." His hand landed on Taylor's shoulder with the weight of expectation and inheritance. My husband glowed under the attention, though his contribution to the company consisted mainly of having the right last name and showing up to meetings he didn't understand. Nobody mentioned the Henderson account I'd saved N2 nights before, or the Morrison Industries contract I'd salvaged by working through 3 consecutive weekends, or the fact that while Nicholas was at his monthly country club whiskey tasting, detecting notes of oak and self-importance, I was rebuilding our entire server infrastructure after a critical failure. "You look tired, dear," Eleanor had murmured, her fingers decorated with enough diamonds to fund my entire department's salary, briefly grazing my shoulder. "Perhaps you should consider better work-life balance. Appearance matters, especially for women in leadership." I'd swallowed my response along with my overcooked salmon. The truth was, I looked tired because I'd been awake for 36 hours straight, but admitting that would only prove their unspoken point, that I couldn't handle the pressure, that I was, as Nia would later write, overwhelmed. The morning routine with Taylor had become a study in marital disconnect. Each day started the same, him fumbling with the expensive espresso machine his parents gifted us, creating coffee that tasted like burnt disappointment while scrolling through sports news on his phone. "Big week ahead," he'd asked that particular Tuesday, and in 2 weeks before everything imploded. "I should hear about the promotion today." I watched his reflection tense in the microwave door. "Right, the promotion?" He took a sip of his failed latte. "Dad mentioned Nia's been really impressive lately. She's been staying late, taking on extra projects." My fingers stilled on my laptop keyboard. Nia Blackwood, who arrived at 9:30 sharp and left at 2:55 on the dot. Nia, whom I'd been training for 3 months at Nicholas's specific request. "She just needs mentoring," he'd said. "Someone to show her how we do things here." So I had. I'd opened my playbook, shared my strategies, explained our client relationships with the patience of a kindergarten teacher. She'd taken notes in her designer portfolio, asking questions that felt increasingly invasive. "How do you handle system failures? What's your backup protocol? Who has administrative access?" I thought she was eager. Turned out she was building a case. The server migration crisis should have been my moment of vindication. For 7 days before Nicholas would slam his palm on that conference table, our entire data infrastructure needed emergency migration at 40 terabytes, an 8-hour window, zero margin for error. Everything went wrong at once. Corrupted files, failed backups, a power surge that shouldn't have been possible. By 10:13 p.m., I'd activated my emergency protocol, calling in my entire team. Logan arrived first, still wearing the program from his daughter Emma's dance recital pinned to his shirt. She understood, he'd said quietly, though I caught him checking videos his wife sent from the auditorium. Priya came next, apology heavy in her voice as she called her husband. I know it's our anniversary dinner. I'll make it up to you. She'd ended the call and dove into code like she was defusing a nuclear weapon. Marcus Thompson, Sarah Kim, the Morrison twins, who communicated in what seemed like telepathic programming language, they all came without question. The conference room became our bunker, littered with laptops, energy drinks, and eventually Chinese takeout that went cold before we could eat it. We're like some weird dysfunctional family, Marcus had joked at 2:02 a.m., attempting to eat lo mein with one hand while typing with the other. Yeah, but at least we chose each other, Sarah had replied, and something about those words felt prophetic. We'd saved everything, every file, every client, every contract. Nicholas would never know we'd been N33NT strokes from losing millions in data and trust. That's what I did. I solved catastrophes so quietly that nobody knew they'd happened. Then came the email, the misdirected message that revealed everything. I'd been reviewing the Henderson account files at 11:47 p.m., preparing my promotion presentation when it appeared, from Nia Blackwood to me. Except it wasn't meant for me. Nicholas. Ease discussed. I've successfully salvaged the Henderson situation. The client was thoroughly impressed with my crisis management. I believe it's time to discuss restructuring. She seems overwhelmed, arrives looking exhausted most mornings. Perhaps fresh leadership would benefit the department. My laptop screen blurred as I read it 2 times, then 3, the Henderson situation. The one I'd personally managed while Nia was posting Instagram stories from a wine tasting. The rescue I'd orchestrated while she slept. I forwarded it to my personal email without thinking, some primitive instinct for self-preservation kicking in. Then I sat in my home office, still wearing the coffee-stained blouse I'd put on an 18 hours earlier, understanding finally that dedication looked like weakness to those who'd never truly worked. 3 minutes, Nicholas announced now, his voice cutting through my memory. The executives remained frozen, but through the glass I saw Priya standing up, then Marcus, then Sarah. One by one my team, my chosen family, began to rise. 2 minutes, Nicholas called out, but his voice seemed to come from underwater. Through the conference room's glass walls, I could see the entire 15th floor frozen in a tableau of disbelief. Sarah Kim had her phone halfway to her ear. The Morrison twins stood at their adjoining desks, identical expressions of shock on their faces. I reached for the framed photo from our last team celebration, the one where we'd worked N772 hours straight to launch the Patterson project. My fingers brushed against something else, a USB drive taped underneath my desk drawer, the one where I'd backed up every email, every document, every piece of evidence that might matter someday. Apparently, someday was today. The morning had started wrong from the moment I'd badged into the building at 6:45 a.m. The security guard, usually chatty, had avoided my eyes. The elevator seemed too quiet. The 15th floor felt like it was holding its breath. When I'd reached the conference room to set up my presentation, the one about our department's 340% efficiency increase, Nia was already there in my seat. The one I'd claimed 3 cent years ago because it faced away from the glaring morning sun. Her laptop was open to spreadsheets I recognized immediately, my department's confidential budget projections, the ones on a secured server she shouldn't have been able to access. "Oh, good morning," she'd said, that saccharine sweetness coating her words like artificial sweetener. "Nicholas asked me to review these before the meeting. You don't mind, do you?" The question wasn't really a question. We both knew it. I'd stood there, laptop bag heavy on my shoulder, watching her scroll through salary allocations, project budgets, vendor contracts. 6 years of carefully built financial architecture. How did you get access to those files? She'd looked up then, and for just a second, the mask slipped. Pure satisfaction flickered across her features before the innocent expression returned. Nicholas gave me temporary admin privileges to help with the transition. Transition. The word hung there between us like a diagnosis. The room had filled gradually, but wrong. David Park from finance arrived first, clutching his tablet like a shield, not meeting my eyes when I said good morning. Then came Margaret Lawson, our legal director, who normally radiated composure but today kept checking her phone, gripping her legal pad with white knuckles. Even the coffee was wrong. Usually, someone would have started the expensive machine by now, the one that ground beans fresh for each cup. Today, there was only silence and the smell of fierce sweat barely masked by expensive cologne. I'd started my presentation anyway, clicked through slides showing our achievements, our metrics, our wins. My voice stayed steady even as I felt the room's energy shifting, darkening, preparing for something I couldn't quite name. As you can see, we've exceeded every target by... The door hadn't just opened. It had exploded inward, the handle cracking against the wall hard enough to leave a mark. Nicholas stood there, his face that particular shade of red that appeared when his blood pressure medication wasn't quite enough. His Italian suit, usually perfect, looked disheveled. His tie was crooked. He crossed the room in three strides, his palm hitting the table with enough force to make everyone's coffee jump. Margaret's actually spilled, brown liquid pooling across her legal pad, but she didn't move to clean it. You have 5 minutes to clear your desk. The words didn't make sense at first. They existed in the air, but my brain refused to process them. I stood there, presentation clicker still in my hand, slide 17% still glowing on the screen behind me, a graph showing the money I'd saved this company. That's when I understood the choreography of this morning. Why Nia had my files, why executives avoided eye contact, why Margaret looked ready to cry or run or both. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned, orchestrated. I had been marked for execution, and everyone except me had known it was coming. Nia leaned back in my chair. Memi my share, and I saw it then. The slight upturn of her lips, the relaxation in her shoulders, the way she examined her manicure with the satisfaction of someone admiring their own handiwork. She'd won something, and we both knew it. But here's what 20% years in tech had taught me. The moment when you think you've won is usually when you're most vulnerable. David Park's fingers were moving across his calculator with the frantic energy of someone watching money evaporate. I knew that motion. I'd seen it during budget crises, contract negotiations, anytime numbers were about to become very, very bad. Margaret had her phone out now, typing with shaking fingers, her face the gray-white of old paper. They understood something Nicholas and Nia didn't. Something about contracts and clauses and the very expensive difference between firing someone privately versus publicly humiliating them in front of witnesses. I set down the presentation clicker with deliberate calm. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head. She'd survived the Depression, raised ed 666 kids alone after my grandfather died, never let anyone see her buckle. When they expect you to break, she told me once, peeling potatoes with hands that never trembled, that's when you stand straightest. Thank you. The words came out clear, genuine even, because in that moment, I felt something I hadn't expected, relief. 6 years of pretending Taylor's family accepted me. 6 years of Eleanor's backhanded compliments about my appearance while I saved her husband's company. 6 years of being good enough to fix every crisis, but never good enough to truly belong. Nicholas's jaw went slack. He'd expected tears, pleading, anger, anything but gratitude. Behind him, I saw several executives exchange glances. Someone's pen rolled off the table and hit the floor with a sound like a gunshot. In the silence, I began packing with the methodical precision I used for system architectures. Each item lifted, examined, placed in the cardboard box that had materialized from somewhere. The backup drive went in first, then the project files, the team photo, my coffee mug with the chip on the handle. "Mon minute," Nicholas announced, but his voice had lost its edge. Confusion was creeping in, the first crack in his certainty. Through the glass, motion caught my eye. Logan Mitchell was standing at his desk, laptop bag already over his shoulder. He wasn't packing, he was already packed. Ready. Then Priya stood, then Marcus. One by one, like a slow wave building strength, my entire team rose from their desks. Nicholas turned to see what I was looking at, and his face went from red to white so fast I thought he might faint. Nia's expression shifted from triumph to confusion to something approaching panic. "Time's up," Nicholas said, but it came out as a question. I picked up my box, its weight familiar and strange at once, 6 and years reduced to what I could carry in my arms. As I walked toward the door, Saint-Tu and security guards appeared, standard protocol for terminations. They mumbled apologetically. Tom and Derek. I'd brought them coffee during late-night lockdowns, knew their kids' names. "I'm sorry about this," Tom whispered. "Don't be," I told him. "You're just doing your job." We walked through the cubicle farm toward the elevator, and that's when the symphony began. The squeak of chairs pushing back from desks, the rustle of bags being gathered, the soft thuds of laptops closing. Logan fell into step beside me, then Priya, her heels clicking a determined rhythm. Marcus, Sarah, the Morrison twins moving in perfect synchronization. By the time we reached the elevator, Fright 2 people had joined our procession. Tom stopped walking. His hand dropped from my elbow. "In 15 years," he said, voice thick with something between awe and respect. "I've never seen anything like this." Neither had Nicholas Harrington, whose empire had just started its collapse, though he wouldn't understand that for another 48 hours. Hours. The elevator doors closed on in 2022 and people, and one security guard who looked like he'd just witnessed a miracle or a massacre. He wasn't sure which. Tom pressed the lobby button with a hand that shook slightly. Nobody spoke during the descent. The only sound was the mechanical hum and someone's phone buzzing insistently. Mine, then Logan's, then Priya's, like popcorn starting to pop. Our phones erupted in a cascade of notifications. When the doors opened to the lobby, we walked out into blazing midday sun, the kind of light that makes everything look overexposed and surreal. Maria at reception stood up so fast her chair rolled backward into the wall. Gerald, the maintenance supervisor, stopped mopping and watched us file past. Someone started a slow clap from the loading dock, I couldn't see who, and then others joined in until the sound echoed off the parking garage walls. "This is insane," Priya whispered beside me. "This is justice," Logan corrected, shifting his laptop bag. We stood there in the parking lot, 23% people blinking in the harsh light, phones buzzing like angry wasps. The Morrison twins were already on their laptops, sitting on the concrete median, typing furiously. Sarah had her phone pressed to her ear, explaining to someone, probably her partner, why she was suddenly unemployed at 11147 Fent on a Tuesday morning. "I should go," I said to no one in particular. My car keys felt foreign in my hand. "We all should," Marcus replied, but nobody moved. We stood there like survivors of a shipwreck, not quite ready to leave the sight of the vessel going down. The drive home took 17 minutes. I know because I watched the clock the entire way, unable to focus on anything else. My phone, tossed in the passenger seat, continued its electronic seizure. I 338 times I reached for it at red lights. In 3AC times, I pulled my hand back. Taylor's car was in the driveway. Of course, he worked from home Tuesdays and Thursdays, a luxury Nicholas had granted his son but would never have considered for anyone else, especially not me, despite my longer tenure and higher position. I sat in my car for a full minute, engine off, listening to the tick of cooling metal. The house we'd bought in a 3 years ago, with help from his parents for the down payment, naturally, looked the same as when I'd left this morning. Same cherry tree in the front yard, same crack in the driveway we kept meaning to fix. Same life, except everything had changed. Taylor met me at the door, his laptop still in one hand, confusion written across his face. Behind him, I could see his home office setup, dual monitors glowing with spreadsheets he probably didn't understand. "Why are you home? Are you sick?" Then he noticed the box in my arms. His face went through a series of expressions like someone cycling through TV channels. Confusion, concern, realization, anger. Dad called. His voice was flat. "He says you lost it in the meeting, says you were unstable, started crying, had to be escorted out by security." I set the box on our entryway table, the one his mother had given us that I'd always thought was too ornate for the space. Is that what he said? He said you've been struggling lately, that Nia had to cover for your mistakes, that he had no choice. I pulled out my phone, ignored the 100 other notifications, and found the forwarded email. Nia's email. The one claiming credit for the Henderson account, the one calling me overwhelmed, the one that was clearly part of a longer conversation with Nicholas I hadn't been privy to. Taylor read it once, then again, his jaw muscle twitching, the tell he'd inherited from his father that appeared when reality didn't match the narrative he'd been fed. This is, he started, then stopped. When did she send this? 3 weeks ago. Accidentally sent to me instead of your father. And you didn't tell me. Would you have believed me? Or would you have said Nia made an honest mistake, that your father would never plot against his own daughter-in-law? The silence stretched between us like a contested border. Taylor set down his laptop, ran both hands through his hair, another inherited gesture. I need to think, he said, grabbing his keys from the hook by the door. I just need to think, Taylor. But he was already gone, the door closing with a decisive click that sounded like punctuation. I stood in our entryway, still in my work clothes, surrounded by the life we'd built on a foundation that was apparently sand. My phone rang, unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something, instinct, exhaustion, morbid curiosity, made me swipe accept. Please don't hang up. Margaret Lawson's voice, barely above a whisper. I'm calling from the bathroom, the executive bathroom on NM16, the one nobody uses. Margaret, your contract, the clause about hostile termination. Nicholas never read it. Legal reviewed it N666 and years ago when you were hired, but he just signed where I told him to sign. Her words tumbled out like water breaking through a dam. The humiliation multiplier alone puts your severance at $800. But with documented harassment, the public nature of it, 2022 and witnesses, we're looking at millions. Millions? Why are you telling me this? The sound of running water. Because in about an hour, Nicholas is going to realize what he's done. And when he does, he's going to blame me. Say I should have warned him. I've worked here and 12% years. I've covered for his temper, his affairs, his questionable decisions. But this is going to end my career. Margaret, can we meet tomorrow? Somewhere nobody from Vertex would go. I have documentation, things you should know, things that might help us both. The call ended before I could respond. I stood there, phone in hand, when it immediately buzzed again. Dylan from my team, former team, had sent a screenshot, a Slack channel called Exodus with 247 members before it shut down. The messages were a flood of disbelief, support, and panic. Did this really happen? 22 and people walked out. What do we do now? Is the Henderson project dead? Who's going to maintain the servers? My LinkedIn app showed 47 notifications. Emails poured in. 3 competitors had already reached out with variations of, heard the news, let's talk. But one email made me stop breathing. Catherine Walsh, the venture capitalist who'd turned down Nicholas's pitch and 6 months ago, telling him his company lacked innovative leadership. Her message was, 2 sentences. Your team's loyalty is worth more than Vertex's entire market cap. Let's build something. I was reading it for the third time when the doorbell rang. Eleanor Harrington stood on my porch at 9:00 p.m., makeup smudged, holding a manila folder like it might bite her. May I come in? Eleanor asked, and for the first time in 6 years, she looked fragile, not the polished society matron who commanded charity boards and country club committees, but a woman carrying weight she could no longer bear alone. I stepped aside. She entered my home, the home she'd helped fund but never truly welcomed me into, and stood awkwardly in the entryway, clutching that manila folder like a confession. Taylor's not here, I said. I know. I waited until I saw him leave. She followed me to the living room, sitting on the edge of our couch as if she might need to flee at any moment. Nicholas fired his own brother this way 20 years ago. Edward, he was CFO, had been with the company since the beginning. She opened the folder, revealing yellowed board meeting minutes, old emails printed on paper that had softened with age. Edward questioned one of Nicholas's decisions publicly, not even criticized, just questioned. Nicholas gave him 10 minutes to clear out. The family never recovered. Edward's wife left him. His kids won't speak to Nicholas. 20 years and the wound still bleeds at every holiday. Why are you telling me this now? Eleanor's laugh was bitter, nothing like her usual musical society trill. Because I've watched my husband destroy people for decades, telling myself it was business that successful men had to be ruthless. But watching him do it to you, someone who saved his company while he was playing golf, someone who made my son happy even if we never showed it, I can't pretend anymore. She pulled out another paper. This is from 5 years ago. Michelle Reeves, VP of Marketing, fired in a board meeting for insubordination. She'd suggested Nicholas's strategy was outdated. Another paper, 3 years ago, James Chin, head of innovation, terminated publicly because he'd received a job offer from a competitor and Nicholas wanted to make an example. They chose the easy path, Eleanor continued, looking directly at me. Nicholas and Taylor both. They avoid conflict by creating bigger conflicts. They'd rather destroy relationships than admit fault. I've enabled it for 35 years, and I'm sorry. Her hug was unexpected, fierce, and brief. She left the folder on my coffee table and disappeared into the night, leaving me with evidence of a pattern I'd been too close to see. My phone rang at 2:07 a.m. I'd finally fallen asleep on the couch, still in my work clothes, the folder's contents spread across the coffee table like a crime scene. Please tell me you're awake. Margaret Lawson's voice was pitched high with hysteria. I am now. Nia destroyed everything. She tried to prove she could handle your systems, wanted to show Nicholas she didn't need the transition period. She was trying to access backup files but deleted the main customer database instead. I sat up suddenly, completely awake. She deleted the entire customer database? That's not the worst part. She tried to recover it herself, didn't call IT, didn't follow protocol. She ran some recovery software she found online. It corrupted everything. The entire East Coast operation has been dark for 6 hours. They're estimating 14 hours minimum before even partial restoration. The silence stretched while I processed this. Our customer database wasn't just names and addresses. It was 30 years of relationship management, purchase histories, custom configurations, support tickets, the DNA of the company's client relationships. How much? I asked. Conservative estimate, $50 million in immediate losses. That's not counting the clients we'll lose, the lawsuits, the reputation damage. Margaret's voice cracked. She's been in the bathroom crying for 2 hours. Nicholas has been screaming at everyone. He threw a laptop, actually, threw it at the wall. Security is on standby. I felt something I hadn't expected. Nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a cold, empty nothing. Nia had engineered my humiliation, and now she was drowning in her own incompetence. Margaret, you need to document everything. Every email, every action, every word Nicholas says. Already am. I'm creating my own insurance policy. She paused. Your team could have prevented this. My team wouldn't have caused it in the first place. After Margaret hung up, I sat in the dark, watching the sunrise creep across my living room walls. Somewhere across town, Vertex Solutions was hemorrhaging money and reputation, while Nia learned that taking credit and taking responsibility were vastly different things. Taylor came home at 7 a.m., looking like he'd slept in his car. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair stood at odd angles, and he reeked of whiskey and regret. Database is gone, he said without preamble. I heard. Dad's lost his mind. He's threatening to sue Nia, but legal says he can't because he gave her the access. He's calling emergency board meetings. Mom's had 2 hand panic attacks. He collapsed on the couch beside me, careful not to touch me. He wants me to convince you to sign an NDA and make this go away quietly. Make what go away? His public humiliation of me, the 2022 and people who walked out, or the fact that his chosen replacement just cost the company $50 million the cent? Taylor rubbed his face with both hands. All of it. He's offering the $800,000 Margaret mentioned, full severance, extended benefits, glowing recommendation. All you have to do is sign saying you won't discuss what happened or compete for 2 years. No. The board is threatening his position. If you sue, if this gets worse, he could lose everything. I turned to look at my husband, really look at him. He was a stranger wearing Taylor's face, speaking Taylor's voice. But the man I'd married, who'd promised to stand by me to be my partner, was gone, if he'd ever existed at all. He should have thought of that before he gave me 5 minutes to clear my desk. I need you to fix this. Those N5 words hung between us like a blade. Not I'm sorry, not a he was wrong, not an I should have defended you, just another demand to sacrifice my dignity for the Harrington family's comfort. I need you to leave, I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. Taylor looked at me then, and for a moment I saw something, awareness maybe, that he'd chosen the wrong side. But Harringtons didn't admit mistakes, they just found someone else to blame. He left without another word, and I knew our marriage had ended in that moment, even if the paperwork would come later. By noon, my living room had transformed into a startup incubator, seen Wells and 22 and people with laptops balanced on their knees, sitting on floors, perched on chair arms, crowded around my dining table. Logan's and 12-year-old daughter, Emma, sat in the corner doing homework, occasionally looking up at the chaos with curious eyes. Phoenix Digital, Priya announced, holding up a napkin where she'd sketched a logo, a stylized bird rising from flames. We're not subtle, but neither were they. Marcus was on his laptop, fingers flying, domains secured, social media handles locked down. I'm also grabbing variations before Vertex thinks to cybersquat. His husband James appeared with a tray of coffee mugs. I made a supply run. Nobody's building a company on empty stomachs. Pizza boxes accumulated like sedimentary layers of ambition. The Morrison twins had somehow created a project management system on my living room wall using sticky notes. Sarah was already reaching out to contacts, her phone voice professional despite sitting cross-legged on my floor. We need incorporation documents, someone said. On it, replied Logan, whose brother-in-law was apparently a corporate attorney. The energy was electric, desperate, hopeful. We weren't just colleagues anymore. We were refugees from a corporate disaster, building something new from the ashes of what Nicholas had destroyed. And in that crowded, chaotic living room, I felt more at home than I had in E66 years at Vertex. My phone buzzed at 4:47 p.m., and 3 days after we'd transformed my living room into Phoenix Digital's first headquarters. Robert Hoffman's number appeared on the screen, Nicholas's lawyer, calling for the 3rd time today. Ms. West, Mr. Harrington has authorized me to increase the offer to 8,000. His voice carried the exhaustion of a man losing a war he'd thought would be easy. This is the baseline severance per your contract. The baseline assumes normal termination procedures, I replied, watching the Morrison twins carry computer equipment into what would become our actual office, a warehouse we'd found yesterday. Being given 5 minutes to clear my desk in front of health and 12 witnesses isn't normal. Margaret Lawson can verify that. The silence stretched. Miss Lawson is no longer authorized to speak on behalf of Vertex Solutions. Of course she wasn't. Nicholas's first instinct was always to shoot the messenger, even when the message was a legal disaster of his own making. Then I suppose we'll let the courts decide what's appropriate. My lawyer will be in touch. I ended the call just as a white Tesla pulled into the warehouse parking lot. Catherine Walsh stepped out, her designer heels clicking against cracked asphalt, surveying our new space with the calculating eye of someone who'd turned a dozen startups into billion-dollar companies. The warehouse was nothing special, 20,000 square feet of concrete impossibility, still smelling of industrial cleaner and the ghost of whatever had been manufactured here before. Fluorescent lights flickered intermittently. The loading dock door didn't close properly. There was a suspicious stain on the floor that looked like it had its own ecosystem. This is perfect, Catherine announced, and she wasn't being sarcastic. It's a disaster, Priya countered, gesturing at a ceiling tile that chose that moment to release a small shower of dust. No, it's hungry space. It wants to become something. Catherine walked the perimeter, her footsteps echoing. You know what Amazon's first office was? A garage. Google? A garage. Also a garage. You've upgraded. You've got walls and everything. She pulled out her phone, made a quick call. Send the contract to my email. Yes, the full amount. She looked at me. 3.5 million no seed funding. I want 20% equity and a board seat. Logan nearly dropped his laptop. You haven't even seen our business plan. I've seen Sin and 22 and people follow their leader out of a stable job into uncertainty. That's worth more than any PowerPoint. She paused at the door. Nicholas Harrington once told me emotional decisions have no place in business. He said it while rejecting my proposal to invest in Vertex because he didn't like my aggressive negotiating style. Funny how his emotional decision to publicly humiliate you just handed me the next unicorn. The next morning, she returned with two and other VCs. They toured our disaster of a warehouse, asked pointed questions about scalability and market penetration, then committed another $2 million on the spot. We hadn't even incorporated yet, and we were valued at $17.5 million. My phone hadn't stopped ringing, but the call that mattered came from Richard Henderson himself, CEO of Henderson Corp. I heard about the situation at Vertex, he said without preamble. I also heard about the database disaster. Nia Blackwood tried to explain to me yesterday why our configurations were lost. She cried, actually cried on a client call. Mr. Henderson, we've worked with your team for 3 years. You personally saved our product launch. Logan rebuilt our entire architecture over a weekend. Priya identified data patterns that increased our efficiency by 200%. He paused. The contracts follow the talent, not the building. We're moving our business to Phoenix Digital effective immediately. By end of day, 3 and more clients had called, Patterson Industries, Morrison Group, Chin Technologies. Together, they represented $30 million in annual contracts. Each one announced their decision on LinkedIn, professional corporate speak that barely disguised their distaste for how Vertex had treated us. Stocks down another 5%, Sarah announced, refreshing her screen. That's 15% total since Tuesday. We were unpacking equipment, setting up desks, actual desks now, bought second-hand from a startup that had failed, when Taylor appeared in the doorway. He looked smaller, somehow diminished, holding a bouquet of roses, red roses. After 6 years of marriage, he still didn't know I was allergic to roses, that I preferred wildflowers. That I'd told him this on our third date. Can we talk? He shifted his weight, uncomfortable in his pressed khakis and polo shirt, his father's uniform, adopted without question. I stepped outside with him, leaving my team to continue building our future. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot's cracked asphalt. Dad's willing to apologize, he said, thrusting the roses at me like a peace offering, or maybe a shield. He'll give you an executive position, corner office, and 20% raise, full restoration of benefits. I didn't take the flowers. He thinks this is about office space. It's a good offer. More than fair, considering... Considering what? That he humiliated me? That Nia destroyed the database trying to prove she could do my job? That, when 22 cent people walked out because they witnessed something unconscionable? Taylor set the roses on the ground between us, and they looked sad there, dying on hot asphalt. He's my father. And I was your wife? Past tense, Taylor. You made that past tense the moment you asked me to swallow humiliation for your family's comfort. His face crumpled slightly, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in days. You're giving up on us, on our marriage. Your father didn't break us. You did, when you came home and asked me to fix his mistake instead of standing by me. When you chose the easy path of family loyalty over the hard path of doing what's right. He looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment I saw the man I'd fallen in love with, the one who'd existed before his father's influence calcified around him like armor. But that man had been buried so long. Resurrection wasn't possible anymore. I should go, he said quietly. Yes. He walked back to his car, the BMW his father had bought him, naturally, and drove away. The roses remained on the asphalt. I left them there. By evening they'd wilted in the heat, petals scattering in the wind like all of Nicholas's carefully laid plans. At midnight, my phone buzzed with an encrypted file from Margaret Lawson. The subject line read simply, "My severance package." The audio file was 43 minutes of a Vertex board meeting. The quality was crystal clear. Margaret had probably recorded it on her phone, placed strategically near the center of the table. 50 million. A voice I recognized as board member Jonathan Cross. He cost us $50 million because he couldn't control his temper. The database is completely corrupted. Another voice. Probably CFO David Sterling. Nia Blackwood had no authorization to access those systems. Nicholas gave her full administrative access. This was definitely Margaret, her voice carefully neutral, against my legal advisement. You promoted your girlfriend's roommate? This voice dripped with disgust. Christina's roommate from college? That's who you thought could replace your daughter-in-law who built half our infrastructure? Nicholas's voice, when it came, sounded hollow. Nia showed promise. She was eager, ambitious. She was unqualified. The slam of a hand on the table. This isn't some family drama, Harrington. You turned a personal vendetta into a $50 million disaster. Maybe more if the clients keep leaving. I listened to the board meeting recording one more time, their voices filling my warehouse office at UT11:01 a.m. This isn't leadership. It's a temper tantrum that cost us $50 million. The disgust in their voices was palpable, even through Margaret's phone speaker. The next morning, everything accelerated. We're doing a press conference, Catherine Walsh announced, striding into our warehouse at 7 a.m. with a media consultant and enough coffee for everyone. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., every tech outlet is begging for a statement. We give them one. I don't want to seem vindictive, I said. You won't. You'll seem like exactly what you are, a leader who refused to accept humiliation as the price of employment. She pulled out her tablet. Meanwhile, Nicholas is holding his own conference at Vertex headquarters at the exact same time. My sources say he's planning to frame this as a strategic restructuring. The thought of Nicholas spinning this disaster into corporate doublespeak should have angered me. Instead, I felt oddly calm. Let him try to polish this catastrophe. The truth has a way of showing through no matter how much corporate varnish you apply. We spent the next 24 hours preparing. Logan and Priya helped write my statement. Sarah coordinated logistics. The Morrison twins somehow got us a professional backdrop and lighting that made our warehouse look like a legitimate tech startup instead of abandoned industrial space. At 1:45 p.m. The next day, I stood in front of the cameras wearing the same navy blazer I'd worn that Tuesday, deliberately. My team flanked me, all 22% of them, dressed professionally but not uniformly. We looked like what we were, individuals who'd chosen to stand together. Good afternoon, I began, my voice steadier than my pulse. 2 weeks ago, Nicholas Harrington gave me 5 minutes to clear my desk after 6 years of building Vertex Solutions' technical infrastructure. Those 5 minutes taught me something valuable, that competence threatens the incompetent. Loyalty means nothing to those who never earned it, and that sometimes the best thing that can happen is being forced to leave a place that never valued you. The cameras clicked like digital rain. Someone from TechCrunch was typing furiously. The Bloomberg reporter was live streaming. Phoenix Digital isn't just a company. It's proof that culture beats strategy, that teams built on respect outperform hierarchies built on fear. We've secured $5.5 million in funding. We've retained clients worth funding million annually. We've done in 20 weeks what Vertex Solutions claimed would take years because we have something they lost: trust. Meanwhile, across town, my phone was lighting up with texts from people watching Nicholas's simultaneous conference. Margaret sent a play-by-play. He's sweating through his makeup. And Nia's behind him looking at her phone, literally job hunting during the press conference. He just said strategic, restructuring for enhanced agility, and a reporter laughed out loud. Someone shared a screenshot from the financial networks. They were showing both conferences on split screen, me, calm and surrounded by my team, Nicholas, red-faced and stammering with Nia beside him scrolling through LinkedIn, apparently having given up any pretense of paying attention. The stock ticker ran beneath both feeds, Vertex Solutions, down another 8%, and we were still celebrating that evening when my phone rang from a blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe accept. Please don't hang up. Nia's voice, but different. Gone was the sugar-sweet coating, the practiced professionalism. She sounded young, desperate, frightened. I know you hate me. I don't hate you, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. Nothing you. A sharp intake of breath. Then I've been terminated. Strategic differences, they called it, but everyone knows it means I destroyed the database. I'm being blacklisted. Nobody will even interview me. She was crying now. Ugly sobs that reminded me she was only funny 26x ambitious and ruthless, but still young enough to believe those were the only qualities that mattered. I have student loans, rent, my mom's medical bills, she has MS, and I'm her only support, and Her voice cracked completely. I know I took credit for your work. I know what I did, but please, just one recommendation. Just something that says I'm not completely incompetent. I looked around our warehouse at my team still working despite the late hour, at the whiteboards covered with actual innovation instead of corporate buzzwords, at the space we'd built on merit instead of manipulation. Nia, I said, and she fell silent except for sniffles. You took credit for the Henderson account. You called me overwhelmed and suggested I needed to be replaced. You smiled while Nicholas gave me 5 minutes to pack M6 years of work. I know, You took credit for others' work. Now you need to take credit for your own failure. That's the only recommendation I can give you. The call lasted exactly 5 per minute. I timed it. 3 and days later, the news broke everywhere at once, and Nicholas Harrington steps down as CEO of Vertex Solutions. The press release was a masterpiece of corporate euphemism, pursuing new opportunities, time for fresh leadership, grateful for his years of service. But everyone knew the truth. The board had given him a choice: resign with a fraction of his dignity intact, or be fired for cause and lose everything. He'd chosen resignation, but it was like choosing which cliff to jump from. The ending was the same. Eleanor called me that evening, her voice hollow but somehow lighter. He's moving to the guest house. 35 years of marriage, and this is what finally broke us. Not his affairs with secretaries, not his ego that needed its own zip code, but watching him destroy you. Someone who'd done nothing but make him successful purely for sport. That's when I knew the man I married was gone, if he ever existed. Eleanor, don't apologize. Don't comfort me. This is freedom, even if it comes 30 years too late. The warehouse felt different that night. The Morrison twins had strung up lights that made the concrete walls look almost warm. Sarah had brought in plants that somehow thrived despite the industrial setting. Marcus had set up a sound system that played quiet jazz while we worked. We did it, Priya said, appearing beside me with 2 and 10 glasses of champagne. Not the cheap stuff anymore. Catherine had sent cases of the real thing. David beat Goliath. The Empire struck back, but the rebels won anyway. Choose your metaphor. Gerald, the maintenance supervisor from Vertex, who'd joined us the week before, raised his mop in the air like a torch, the same gesture from that Tuesday but different now. Then it had been solidarity, now it was victory. To second chances and first-class revenge, he called out, and everyone raised their glasses. But I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about the contract we'd just landed, the one Vertex had been courting for 2 years, Global Tech, whose CEO had called personally to say, "We saw the press conferences. We saw how Vertex treats the people who built their success. We choose to work with builders, not destroyers. Our valuation had hit and 50 million were sent. Not bad for a company that started in my living room with pizza boxes and panic. It's not revenge," I told Priya, watching my team, my family of choice, working late because they wanted to, not because someone was counting their hours. It's just success. The revenge is just a side effect. But somewhere across town, Nicholas Harrington sat alone in a guest house behind the mansion he could no longer afford, his empire reduced to rubble in less than a month, learning too late that when you give someone 5 minutes to pack their life, sometimes they take everything with them when they go. The champagne had gone flat by morning, but nobody cared. We were still riding the high of our $50 million valuation when Margaret Lawson walked through our warehouse door at 10 a.m. carrying a banker's box and wearing an expression I'd never seen on her face before, determination mixed with something darker. "I need a 5 minutes of your time," she said, and the irony of that specific number wasn't lost on anyone. She set the box on my desk, a real desk now, bought from a liquidation sale, scarred but solid. I've been Vertex's legal director for 412 years. I've watched Nicholas destroy careers, break employment laws, cover up harassment claims. I documented everything. She opened the box, revealing folders meticulously labeled by date and violation type, every illegal termination, every settlement we paid to keep people quiet. Every time he screamed at someone until they cried, then had me write up paperwork saying they resigned for personal reasons. Logan looked up from his laptop. Why keep all this insurance? Margaret said simply, I knew eventually he'd turn on me too. I was right. He's been telling the board I should have prevented your mass exodus, that I failed in my fiduciary duty. She pulled out a thick folder. This one's my favorite, 3 years of emails where he explicitly told me to ignore legal protocols. She turned to me then, her gray eyes sharp behind designer glasses. I want to be your chief legal officer. In exchange, I'll ensure Nicholas never works in tech again. My revenge might be colder than yours, but it's been fermenting for 12 years. I know where everybody is buried, because I helped dig the graves. Priya whistled low. That's dark. That's business, Margaret corrected. He taught me that. Now I'm going to teach him what happens when you create enemies who know your secrets. I looked at this woman who'd sat in that boardroom watching my humiliation and realized she hadn't been complicit. She'd been collecting evidence. Welcome to Phoenix Digital, I said. Margaret's first official act was scheduling the settlement negotiation. Neutral territory, she insisted. The Marriott downtown, conference room N12. It costs an $800 an hour, which Nicholas will be paying for. The meeting was set for Thursday at button 10 a.m. I arrived early, finding the room exactly as expensive and soulless as expected. Leather chairs that tried too hard, a table polished to mirror brightness, windows overlooking a city Nicholas once thought he owned. He arrived 15 minutes late, a power play that might have worked when he had power to play with. But the man who walked in wasn't the Nicholas Harrington who'd slammed his palm on a boardroom table. This version looked deflated, his Armani suit hanging loose on a frame that had lost weight from stress. His lawyer, Robert Hoffman, looked equally exhausted. Let's make this quick, Robert said, pulling out documents. Mr. Harrington is prepared to offer one for $1.2 million full benefits continuation for 24 months and immediate vesting of all stock options. Margaret leaned forward, plus a written statement acknowledging that the termination was handled inappropriately and a non-disparagement clause that goes both ways. Nicholas's jaw clenched, that familiar tell, but he nodded. The man who never apologized, never admitted fault, was about to sign a document acknowledging his failure. The room was silent except for the scratch of pens on paper. Nicholas signed with a hand that trembled slightly, his signature smaller than the bold scroll I remembered. When he passed the document to me, our eyes met. No words were exchanged, but entire conversations happened in that silence. His eyes said, "You destroyed me." Mine replied, "You destroyed yourself." His said, "I gave you everything." Mine answered, "You gave me 5 minutes." As I endorsed the check, $1.2 million more money than my parents had seen in their lifetime, I felt something I hadn't expected, not satisfaction or vindication, just emptiness, the hollow feeling of winning a war that should never have been fought. Nicholas stood to leave, then paused at the door. For a moment, I thought he might speak, might finally say something real, but Harrington men didn't apologize. They just retreated to lick their wounds in private. After he left, Margaret pulled out her phone and showed me something that made my breath catch. Security footage from Vertex dated the day before Nicholas's resignation. "Tom from security sent this to me," she said. "He thought you should see it." The grainy footage showed Nicholas standing in what had been my office, now completely empty. The timestamp read 9:47 p.m. He was alone, speaking to the empty room, though the security camera didn't capture audio. "He stood there for 20 minutes," Margaret said. Tom could read his lips for part of it. He kept saying, "I gave her 5 minutes. She took everything." "He's wrong," I said quietly. "He took everything from himself. I just refused to go down with his ship." Margaret nodded. "Tom wanted you to know something else. He's the one who made sure the cameras captured everything that Tuesday, every angle of the boardroom, the walkout, all of it. He said watching you maintain dignity while Nicholas lost his mind was the best thing he'd witnessed in 15 French years of security work." My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. "Can you meet? Important." I found her at a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place that served $12 lattes to people who thought price equaled quality. She looked different, younger somehow, though she'd aged years in the past month. I filed for divorce this morning, she said without preamble, served him papers at the country club. During the monthly board meeting, maximum witnesses, maximum humiliation. Eleanor. Don't pity me. This is 35% years overdue. She stirred her overpriced coffee with deliberate calm. I excused his cruelty as strength, his affairs as stress relief, his destruction of people's careers as business necessities. But watching him destroy you, someone who'd done nothing but succeed purely because he could, that was when I understood I'd been enabling a monster. She pulled out her phone, showing me a photo of legal documents. I'm taking half of everything, the houses, the investments, his precious wine collection that he spent more time with than his family. My lawyer says the prenup won't hold. Too many documented infidelities. What about Taylor? Eleanor's face darkened. Taylor chose his side. He could have stood by you. Instead, he asked you to absorb humiliation to keep his father comfortable. He's exactly what I raised him to be, a coward who mistakes compliance for loyalty. She stood to leave, then paused. The Harrington dynasty took 3 generations to build. Nicholas destroyed it in N55 minutes, the very A55 minutes he gave you. There's poetry in that, don't you think? As she walked away, I realized the Harrington empire hadn't just crumbled, it had imploded entirely. Nicholas lost his company, his reputation, his marriage, his legacy, all because he couldn't resist humiliating someone who'd done nothing but make him successful. The settlement check cleared the next day, fitting in $1.2 million and sitting in my account, feeling simultaneously like justice and blood money. I stared at the $1.2 million on my account on my banking app, the number still feeling surreal. 6 months ago, this would have been a fantasy. Now it was just a line item in a much larger story, seed money for something that had already grown beyond my wildest expectations. The warehouse barely resembled the disaster we'd moved into half a year ago. The flickering fluorescents had been replaced with warm LED panels that Logan insisted were better for productivity and mental health. The suspicious stain was gone, covered by industrial epoxy flooring that Priya picked because it matched our logo colors. We had real furniture now, standing desks, ergonomic chairs, even a kitchen that didn't smell like decades of neglect. "Mom, look!" Emma, Logan's daughter, called from what we designated as the homework corner. She held up her math test, N98% TONT. Priya helped me with the formulas last week. This had become our rhythm. Emma did homework here after school while Logan worked. The Morrison twins taught her coding basics. Sarah helped with her science projects. We weren't just a company, we'd become the family some of us never had, the support system corporate culture promised but never delivered. $75 million valuation. As of this morning, Marcus announced, updating our celebration board. Yes, we had one of those now, covered in wins both big and small. And Richardson Industries just signed. That's Hyopuri major 40 employees and 12 major clients. People who'd chosen us not for the stability, we were still a startup after all, but for the culture. They'd seen our press conference, heard about the walkout, knew exactly what we stood for. Every resume came with a note about wanting to work somewhere that valued people over profits. Priya's parents had visited last week from Mumbai, performing a traditional blessing ceremony in our conference room. Her mother had touched my shoulder and said, "You gave my daughter purpose beyond a paycheck. That's worth more than any valuation." I was reviewing contracts when the door opened. Taylor stood there, looking like a ghost of the man I'd married. He'd lost weight, but not in a healthy way. More like grief had been eating him from the inside. In his hand were papers I recognized immediately, divorce documents. "Can we talk?" We went to the break room, the nice one with actual chairs and a coffee machine that worked. He sat across from me, the papers between us like a border we were about to formally recognize. "I've been in therapy," he said without preamble. "Twice a week for 4 months, learning about family dynamics, enmeshment, enabling, terms I didn't even know existed when we got married." "That's good, Taylor." "I should have stood up for you." The words rushed out like they'd been building pressure. "That Tuesday, when Dad humiliated you, I should have been in that boardroom defending you. Oh, I should have walked out with you. Instead, I came home and asked you to fix his mess. I chose comfort over courage, familiarity over what was right." He pushed the papers toward me. "I'm not asking for forgiveness or another chance. I know that ship has sailed. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I lost, what I threw away because I couldn't stand up to my father." "Are you still at Vertex?" I asked. He laughed, but it was hollow. "Nobody's at Vertex. It got absorbed by Stratton Corp last month. They kept the patents and fired everyone else. Dad's reputation made sure nobody would buy it intact." We signed the papers in relative silence, just the scratch of pens and the hum of the coffee machine. In this same room where my team had planned Phoenix Digital's future, I was signing away the past. Taylor stood to leave, then turned back. "I hope you find someone who sees your worth immediately," he said. "Not after it's too late, not after they've already lost you. Someone who stands up for you on Tuesday, not apologizes for it at 6 months later." After he left, I sat there for a moment, feeling the weight of ending a marriage that had probably been over long before Nicholas gave me those 5 minutes. But there was peace in it, too. Clean endings made room for better beginnings. Margaret appeared in the doorway. "You okay?" "Yeah, just closing chapters." I stood, shaking off the melancholy. "What's up?" "Thought you should see this." She showed me her phone, Nicholas's LinkedIn profile, updated that morning. Southampton independent business consultant, working from an address I recognized as a strip mall on the outskirts of town. His latest post was about leadership through adversity and the importance of decisive action. N3 in likes. I clicked on them. N2 were clearly bought accounts, and one was from someone trying to sell him marketing services. "That's sad," I said. "That's consequences," Margaret corrected. "He works alone from a rented office above a tax preparation service. No clients, no prospects, no future in tech. His reputation is so toxic that even desperate startups won't touch him." I thought about the Nicholas who'd stood at the head of his mahogany table, emperor of his domain, counting down my professional execution. Now he had infinite time and nothing to fill it with, no employees to terrorize, no board to impress, no family to come home to, just an empty office and LinkedIn posts that nobody read. "Do you feel bad for him?" Margaret asked. "No," I said honestly. "I feel nothing. He's just a cautionary tale now, a footnote in Phoenix Digital's origin story." That afternoon, we held our weekly all-hands meeting. Not in a sterile boardroom with people checking their phones, but in our open workspace with everyone genuinely engaged. The Morrison twins presented their new framework. Sarah outlined the client growth trajectory. Gerald, yes, he was our official chief morale officer now, announced Friday's team lunch. Looking at these 40 people who'd chosen to build something with us, I thought about those in 5 minutes, how they'd seemed like an ending but were actually a beginning. Nicholas had given me 5 minutes to pack up my professional life. In return, I'd gained a real family, a company built on respect, and the knowledge that when you refuse to accept humiliation, you often find dignity waiting on the other side. "Hey," Priya said, appearing beside me. "Catherine Walsh just called. Bloomberg wants to do a feature on us, the company that rose from a 5-minute firing." I smiled. "Tell them yes, but make sure they know we're not the story of a firing. We're the story of what happens when good people refuse to let small people make them smaller." The warehouse hummed with productive energy. Somewhere across town, Nicholas sat in his strip mall office, probably refreshing his LinkedIn to see if anyone had liked his latest post about resilience. The difference between us wasn't that I'd won and he'd lost. It was that I'd learned of 5 minutes could build an empire while he was still trying to understand how 5 minutes had destroyed one. If this story of corporate karma had you rooting for justice, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when 22 employees silently stood up and followed her out, turning a humiliation into a revolution. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more incredible revenge stories like this.